So I'd love to go ahead and welcome everyone to our panel that we're calling How I Built This, which is always a panel that's near and dear to my heart as the founder of Glam Hive. I think what prompted me to ever even think of starting a company are women and men like that are on our panel today. And so I'd love to introduce Hillary Kerr, who is the co-founder of Who What Wear, which is amazing. Literally, I think my early pitch decks cited Who What Wear as like why Glam Hive would be a good idea, even though we're quite different. And then Cindy Eckhart, who is the founder of Sprout Pharmaceutical and also the Pink Ceiling Fund. And she's a huge supporter of female founders. And that is how I met Cindy and just love her. And then we have Tara Roods Dan and Stephen Dan, who are the power duo in the apparel world. Tara with L'Agence, and Stephen has his own denim line. And now the nervousness of our panel has me forget it. So Stephen, tell me the name of your brand again.
It's Montfrere.
Montfrere, yeah. A men's denim line. So they'll talk about this, but they've done some denim. J Brand is one of Tara's family's brands. And I think if there's a woman who hasn't worn J Brand, I'd like to meet her. So just a little bit of housekeeping. Anyone that has questions during the panel can put it in chat, and I will see that if I don't get too carried away, and then we'll be able to ask everyone your questions. We usually go for 30 minutes and then save 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So I'm going to start with Hillary. Well, let me preface this by saying I think one of the most interesting things about what I've always loved is what causes someone to kind of start, what causes someone to begin, because the journey is long, the road is tough. And I think that in particular this time when we all have had a year to reflect on what is meaningful in life, we do see a lot of people that are thinking they want to finally kind of go for their dreams. So when we step all the way back at that day one moment, the moment when you decide, I'd love to hear about that. So starting with you, Hillary, what caused you to start Who What Wear?
Well, you have to remember this was a long time ago. So if you can think back, way back, all the way back to 2006. So I found myself in LA. I was a freelance writer after having been on staff as an editor at Elle magazine in New York. And at that point in time, it was sort of like the beginning of the apex of celebrity street style. And I remember I would go and buy my weekly gossip magazines, and I would go on those websites, not because I was so interested in the gossip, though obviously gossip is fine, but I personally was interested in all of the paparazzi photos of my favorite tastemakers and actresses, models, etc. And that was the only place that you could see those photos. I mean, Elle wasn't publishing those photos. Vogue wasn't publishing those photos. They didn't even have websites. And like maybe there would be a street style photograph of Ashley Olsen that ended up in Vogue, but it would be 3 months later and they would never identify what she was wearing. And that's the stuff I was actually personally interested in. So at the time, my now longtime business partner, then just friend, she was also a former Elle editor. And she came to me and said, what if we started a website that had all of these of the moment photos, but we didn't talk about any of the gossip. We just talked about what they were wearing. And I loved the idea because it's basically what I was doing in my free time for myself anyway. And I also thought it was really important at that moment to talk about fashion in a different way. I was an insider, and even I found fashion and the way that the language used around fashion was very exclusionary. And I wanted to do something that felt much more accessible, which seems super obvious now, but literally no one was doing that in 2006. So basically, I would like to say that my entrepreneurial journey started as an accident. It was just a happy coincidence, but it's kind of crazy because now it's been Catherine and I started the company in 2006. So it'll be almost 15 years. And now we have, Who What Wear the site. We have 3 books. We have a hit podcast and another on the way that we haven't announced, and a best-selling line of clothing at Target. But it literally just started as an idea between the two of us. I remember we were like sitting in her car in front of my apartment and she said, what if we did this thing? I was like, cool, let's do it. And she's like, no, I want you to think about it. I said, yeah, I did. Let's do it. So, I mean, it was really just so off the cuff. I would love to say like it was so very meticulously and thoughtfully planned, but it just seemed like a good idea. And I also had the privilege of, I didn't have medical debt. I didn't have school debt. I was 26 years old, so no one was depending on me. All I had to take care of was my rent for the month and my car payment, and enough top ramen to get me through. So it was the fates all aligned in a very particular and nice way for us to start it.
That's awesome. Cindy, how about you?
Well, I love what Hillary said, because I think it is passion first. How do you get started? And I have kind of two starts. I'll tell you, Stephanie. One was my leap from kind of classic corporate into entrepreneurship. And that was just a lot about looking around and thinking, why in the world am I creating all of this value for others and getting a paycheck as opposed to creating value for myself? And I think I felt like I had enough of a track record. I could make a leap. I could start something for myself. But my second company is really, I think, what ultimately catapulted to the biggest success. And that was more a passion to what Hillary's saying around just the subject matter. It spoke to me. So I had built a company on the oddball here in healthcare, but for women's causes in particular. I had built a company with one of the male sexual health drugs. I looked around, there were 26 things to serve men's needs. This could be in fashion, this could be in medicine, whatever that may be. There was a very crowded marketplace. And I thought to myself, why the hell am I doing this when it's just one of another, as opposed to the one thing for women? So there are 26 FDA approved drugs for some form of male sexual dysfunction, not a single one for women, despite the fact that more women than men actually suffer from issues. And so I thought, what am I doing? I sold off that business and I leapt in, took it down to zero to really fight this cause. And I think that's what it is. Passion always comes first, right? Nobody asks themselves, like, how do I start a billion-dollar company? I think what they say is, how do I make a massive difference? And when they're chasing that, that's really where the billion-dollar ideas come from.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's totally true. I'll be able to, I'm not going to jump in on all of this, even though I could, because everything you guys are saying resonates so much. I love it. Stephen and Tara, I know that you guys kind of came, obviously you're a beautiful married couple, but like, tell us each about your journeys.
Ladies first.
I am third generation in the garment industry, and from the womb, I've always listened to the shop talk and loved fashion. It was something about feeling secure, when you put clothing on, no matter how you were really feeling on the inside, if you really knew how to put yourself together, it was like you were halfway there. And as you got older, you were really feeling the inside and the outside really matched. And I just loved the feeling of having women look and feel beautiful. And I think that it was just, besides being in fashion, it was about inspiring, your team or the people around you, just in clothing and as well as meeting people along the way. It was just such a great feeling. And really, that's how Stephen and I kind of met.
That is how we met.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I started out also corporate America, retail, designer world, and going back to what Cindy was saying, you get to a point where you've done so much for other companies and you're like, now I need to do this for myself and take it on. So I opened up my first Stephen Dan boutique in 2005, which is how I ended up meeting Tara. So going through retail, Tara and I met, and then we got married. I walked into her showroom one day, and that was it.
True story.
True
That
story.
was it. That's awesome. I love it. That's
Yeah.
great. So those are awesome stories about how you got started. And then we'll kind of fast forward to like once you kind of actually are in it. So I think this kind of moves the conversation to, I'll tell you that when I started Glam Hive, I literally, the year I started it, I think our password for everything was like fly private that year. Like, honestly, it was like fly private 2014. I'm like, how about coach 2023? I mean, right? The journey is so much longer than you think it's going to be. And I think that that's what trips people up, is I think in particular with tech, you see people that, oh my God, they're like overnight success. And you literally think that's what it's going to be. And so I would love to talk about grit and what that plays in the journey. And so, Hillary, we'll go with you. Do you have an example of a moment when you just really had to, like, you thought, hey, I mean, maybe your journey was perfectly smooth, but was it? Or were there moments where you're like, why am I doing this? What am I doing? You know?
Girl, no, not a smooth, seamless journey at all. In fact, I still feel like I'm in the middle of all of it at all times. It's just the goalpost keeps moving. But I think that grit is, to your point, like really important, and I think it goes back to, as Cindy was saying earlier, passion. I feel lucky every single day that I get to wake up and work in an industry that I love, with a team that I love, creating content that I love and consume myself. So I think that that's always been the thing that has grounded me through all of the difficult points, is that I really believe in what we're doing. I think, the fact that we were, accessible price points, accessible body types, accessible everything, and making everything shoppable, translating everything from the runway to really teaching our audience how to make things their own. Like, that has always been the guiding principle of Who What Wear. And so I feel like there's still so much to do. And so that, I think, ultimately keeps me going, even when things are hard. And by the way, they're hard all the time. Like, we started the company and then the recession hit. I mean, it was like we had to take, we had just started paying ourselves, Catherine and I, and then we had to reduce our salary in, I think, by over half, so that our team could get paid, so that we could just weather the storm and try and make it out the other side. Because, by the way, you want to know whose budgets got cut first back in 2008? Digital. So that was us. So, there've been a million moments like that. But I think the other thing that's really helpful is that as you go on, you realize that there are just ups and downs, and that is the natural cycle of any business, is that there are going to be hard times and there are going to be good times. And it makes you not worry as much about the leaner moments, because it just forces you to be scrappier and keep going and more innovative. And I think that's the important thing to keep in mind, at least for us anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you that these digital events were born out of kind of some of that, where the plan was to do in real life events last year, and to have this we had just done one in LA the year before. And then I just was like, okay, well, I'm not standing still for 6 weeks while this pandemic happens. I mean, honestly, I think I was like 2 months, right? I mean, who would have thought? So Cindy, how about you? Talk about grit or perseverance or.
Oh, it is necessary. I'm going to echo Hillary. It never gets easy. I mean, for as long as I've built 2 companies from scratch, I'm on my 3rd. I had one of those I sold that I got back. I mean, these stories are kind of never ending in terms of that constant, willingness. I think you're constantly being tested for how much do you want this, right? The universe is constantly testing you. And I was laughing, Stephanie, when you said, the perceived overnight success story. No such thing. There is no such thing as an overnight success story. I think that you don't see all of the years, I think, that people have put into it. For me, one of my hardest moments was that I had done all this scientific work. We had this remarkable discovery for women, and my fate was completely in the hands of the FDA. And so I had, done the work, and I waited for a decision, and they turned me down. And really, it was the end of my business at the time. They completely had the final word. And, I went back and cried my eyes out. I think I took to the bed over the weekend. I went back to my inbox and read all of these emails from women who were counting on me and, saying, don't give up, keep up the fight. And I went in on Monday, and I can remember I gathered my whole team around our table, and they had gone home over the weekend to, work on their resumes and get ready to find other jobs. And I gathered them around, and everybody was waiting for sort of me to say, okay, this is it. And I said, we're going to fight the FDA. And everyone just sat there for a second. And my head of IT raised his hand, and he's like, can you do that? And I'm like, we're about to find out. And he put pink boxing gloves on my desk, and they sit there today. And I think, to your point in this question, we took on the government for women's sexual pleasure. I like to call that the road less traveled, but it is part of what these journeys are. And it's that passion layered with courage. And I think that maybe was one of my mistakes. And for everybody who's, listening here, at the beginning, I think when you're thinking about making a leap into something, or when you're thinking about what that path might look like, we all tend to be pretty perfectionistic. I'm pretty sure on this panel, we're pretty perfectionistic. That's just slowing you down. Success does not come from having all the answers. It comes from having the courage. You're going to have to get up and fight another day.
Yeah. And I do like that about being a perfectionist. I think I talk to our stylists about that a lot, because people will say, well, I just want to wait for this. I'm like, here's the one thing I've learned. Don't wait. Literally just don't wait. Just put it out there, and then you'll know. And this would be a good question for Stephen and Tara, because you guys are always putting product out there, where people are wearing it, and then it's affecting how they look in their body. And so when it comes to, going back to the original question of like grit or challenges, what do you guys face because we all kind of come from different angles, but, from a designer perspective or design perspective?
Go.
Thank you. I come from a family business. So originally, J-Brand, before we sold, and Legence was something I moved over to. Having to work with your family can be challenging at times, with the people you're working with, always having to prove yourself, especially when I was younger. Today, not so much, and then having to be and make sure that, you're working so tightly with your family. But I remember after we sold J-Brand, Legence was something that my family had owned, and I came in as a partner, and we were revamping it. This was in 2014. I just got married, and the whole, everything was changing, and Legence was not at the level that J-Brand was. I spent, 11 years, building J-Brand with my family. I was, running sales, and it was completely different. What I stepped into was something brand new. And I took she was my assistant at the time and now runs the sales business at Legence, but I took her with me, and her mom said, well, she was leaving some successful brand to come onto a brand that she was unfamiliar with at the time. And, why was I taking her daughter? And I said, I promise you at one point, she will be a superstar. And in my head, that's what I had. What you put out there is basically, what you want to receive. And I remember just digging down, like really just graveling at times and, wondering, God, this is completely different. And she was the reason why I really stuck through it. At times I really was like, this is a lot, to build from scratch again. My family has been there. This is my first time doing it as a partner with my family and trying to prove myself again. And every time I would think that my head of wanting to break down and cry, because when you're young, you think, oh, as it grows, things are going to get less and it's going to be so easy. And life is just going to be la, la, la. But as it gets more and more and more, life gets more and more and more. And some days I'd come home with my hair looking like it's stuck in the socket, wanting to just be hysterically crying. And I would think in my head, Mackenzie's mom telling me, you took my child away from her career and blah, blah, blah. And we just kept digging. And it's really, you have to be passionate about what you do. If you're not passionate, then you shouldn't be in doing what you're doing, because you got to give it your all. You got to know that you're giving 10,000% of yourself in order to succeed. And yeah, there's always going to be times that are tough. Never forget that. But always know that where there's good, there's bad, and where there's bad, there's great. And that's just how it continues to grow. So that would be my grit story.
And Stephen, like, I love your Instagram, because I was looking at one of your posts and you were like, work hard now and yacht in the future. And like, it just like, go, go, go. I loved it. And so you can look at, Cindy has an awesome Instagram. Everyone here does, but it's always so positive. And I think, so is it always positive for you? How do you get power? Like, you're dynamic, you're powerful, you're putting positive intention out there. What do you do during those times where like inside you're like, oh my God?
I think a lot of times if you follow my Instagram, there are moments where I'm very transparent. And if I'm having a bad day, I do put it out there, because it reflects of who you are, and your followers, they really want to know exactly who you are. And I feel like if you're positive all the time, it's not real. They really, they need to know exactly how you're feeling. So if I'm having a bad day, I will post something about it, but follow up with something positive about getting through it. Because I think life, especially now, It's really about getting to that next point, getting through the next day. So I try to be as transparent as possible with the followers and engage as much as possible, but putting fresh content out there all the time and making sure that what we're putting out there is good for the world, because there's so much that I see on social media that I'm like, I wish that these accounts didn't exist because it's so much negativity. So, there's a balance, but we try to make sure that we're somewhere in the middle of that.
Yeah. And how do you guys stay inspired?
Each other.
Yeah.
It's each other as well.
It's actually quite interesting to be in the same business as your partner. I also work with Tara's brother. We have, I co-founded with Sean Rudis, a men's denim brand called Monfrere. I came into the family, I came into a denim family. And of course I had my own quirks about, fits and fabrics and things like that. So once J Brand was sold, Sean and I started Monfrere. And to be in the same exact realm of business that your wife is in, there's something interesting about that also, because there's that competitive side that we both have. So, we often come to some sort of conversation about like, oh, I had that color on my line first. And she'll say, no, I had that on my line first. And, so there's an incredible dynamic. And I don't think if we were in different careers, we would be as close as we are, because we understand each other. And I understand if I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and Tara's on the phone with Hong Kong, or if she wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get a drink of water and I'm on the phone, we understand that things need to get done. So, there are certain,
we balance each other as well. I mean, it's important definitely we're very passionate people in everything we do, and just in general. So inspiring each other is just wanting each other to be successful, and not financially, just within ourselves, because it starts within. And then with that, you'll be able to empower each other. And, he's I have to say, not because he's my husband, he's an incredible man, and he's very supportive, and which is, the reason why I'm able to reach my heights because of that. And I'm so proud of him and what he does. I'm like his number one, PR agent, So it's great, and the inspiration's there. And I think that it starts here in your home before you walk out the door. So it's, I feel very lucky to have that.
Yeah, you are lucky. It's awesome. Cindy, what keeps you inspired? I mean, it's such a ridiculous question, but I'll ask it anyway, because you seem like a bubble of inspiration.
What gets me inspired is getting into a room, even if it's virtual, with a bunch of owners. There is nothing more energizing than being around. Stephanie, you inspire me. Watching women build it from scratch, own a piece of their destiny. This is what fires me up. People who have the DNA of an owner, who are willing to take risks, to bet on themselves, to trip and stumble, but get back up. I mean, that really is. I mean, I really do follow. I'm so proud of everything you've done, for all the curveballs you've been thrown. And whether it be Hillary or Tara or Stephen, or really this incredible team as well that I've been fortunate to surround myself by over all of these years, like, they keep you going. This can be very lonely. I think that's a piece of it. As you build something from scratch, you can feel very isolated, because you are riding a roller coaster and you're not so sure you're going to get up over that next hump. And I think if you've got, the people around you, or the support network like this, nothing like it to really energize you to, again, make the choice to get up and go back at it.
What do you feel, Cindy, about, we'll flip to this, but like the concept of failure? You and I have kind of talked about this. There was a moment, not with what Glam Hive is today, but where we started before we did a hard pivot. I felt like I really, really failed. It was a very, very difficult, lonely time. And I felt really embarrassed about it. Like I blew my chance. And now I have a completely different perspective. But you talk to lots of founders at every stage of the business. What have you come to know is true about failure?
There is no failure. There's only not trying. And I really think if we could reframe it that way for ourselves, we've almost gotten into a place, and I work a lot, obviously, in the startup world and, investing in female founders. And we've almost gotten to a cultural norm of a conversation where we sort of say like, failure is like, it proves that I've done it. And I think we're celebrating a lot of these things. Failure is inevitable. It's a piece of the journey. It's, in essence, if I look back at my career, more things haven't gone my way than have gone my way. That's the truth. But the only version of failure, I think, if we could all reframe it and give ourselves a little bit of, what's the word, forgiveness or permission or whatever that is, failure is just not trying. I don't see you as having failed at all. And yet we are so hard on ourselves in moments that just don't go our way. That's part of the path.
Yeah, it could be just pure stubbornness. Maybe I'm just a brat and wanting to go my way instantly.
Sure. That sounds like a founder.
Yeah, right. Hillary, how about you? I mean, I know that, and we'll get into the topic of funding, because I think that your company has an accelerator or an incubator that you work with founders. But Hillary, what is your perspective on, failure or when things don't exactly go your way?
So I have a podcast called Second Life where I talk to women about their careers and pivots. And we talk about failure a lot on it because I think it's so important. We live in this like Instagram perfect filter world where everyone just shows their highlight reel and no one's talking about the really hard stuff, at least not publicly. And so I've gotten to interview all of these amazing women, from Reese Witherspoon to Aurora James to Jennifer Lopez to Eva Chen. And the one thing that is constant through all of it is that failure is inevitable. It's really just about how you learn from it and how you respond to it. So like, we've made a million mistakes at Who What Wear over the last 15 years, but we learn from that process. And if you don't learn from it, then that actually does seem like a real failure to me. Like if you're not actually taking active learnings from what didn't work out, and you figure out your process in a different way. Like we have some guardrails on our process now. So we test everything. So we test with our community, we look at our data. So when we're taking a risk on something, it's a calculated risk. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at the same time, like you don't necessarily have to jump into everything completely blindly. Like you can sort of gauge how much of a failure you think something may be and calculate your risk based on it. So I think that's the important part, is how you respond to it, what you learn from it, and then also being smart about what risks you are going to take, because they change depending on where you are in your life, in your finances, in your career, in your personal life. Like your appetite changes over the years, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to open it up for some questions, just because, believe it or not, we're like at 30 minutes. One of the questions that one of our attendees asked was about getting funding. And so, Cindy, obviously you fund businesses at all stages, but what advice do you give women and men that are thinking about, the whole funding question? Like, how do you get funding?
Yeah.
From your perspective.
So one thing, don't be so seduced by the notion of venture capital. That's my first bit of advice. We watch TV shows that make us think that's the holy grail. If I just get a check, I'm done. Actually, like the moment you get that check is paralyzing fear, because you have to pay it back and then some. But I would say explore angel networks. I'm a big believer in that. I raised $100 million through nothing but angels, never a check from a venture capital firm. You end up holding on to more of your company. So don't go too soon for funding. And then I think when you can find these, by the way, it's as easy as Googling. In any city that you're in, there is a group of angels who get together to evaluate pitches like their own regional Shark Tank, if you will. So it's really as easy as Googling it. And then I think when you get in front of them and you pitch them, I have kind of 3 pieces of advice in your pitch deck. I think you have to answer 3 questions. What are you uniquely trying to do? Why are you the person to do it? And what's in it for them as an investor if they go on the ride with you? And if you can make sure you just answered those questions in that first meeting, I'll bet you'll get the second date.
I love that. I know you. I love that it's like dates. I love it.
It is dates. I know. And people come in and they're like, I want the ring. I want the ring. And they want to tell you everything. And you're like, no, stop. Just get the second date. Just whet their appetite and get the second date.
It's hard when you feel like you're up to bat and it's your one chance. Yeah. So that's good advice. There's a question for Hillary. What advice would you give someone building out an editorial media company / team for the first time?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard. Because building a team is the hardest piece of it and it's the most important piece of it, obviously. Like the only reason that we are successful at Who What Wear is because we've built an amazing team over the years. And I feel incredibly lucky that people have entrusted us with their career paths. It's truly, the biggest honor to that someone will come and work for you. But I think that being really clear about what the job is and what success looks like in that job so that everyone has concrete measurable steps that they know, okay, like if I take this job, these are the things I'm going to need to execute in the first year. This is how success will be measured. Like when you can get on the same page as someone really early on, obviously you're wooing them, they're wooing you. It's a mutual process, but I think that transparency is of paramount importance. Like you want to make sure that they have the right mindset for your company. I also think that it's so important to make sure that the person is a cultural fit. So whatever that culture is that you have, try and figure out how to identify the right questions to make sure that that person will fit in with your team, that the values are shared, that you're clear about those values, because someone can come in and be a toxic person and it can cause such great damage. So I think that making sure that you have that right culture fit is absolutely essential. I think the best piece of news though is that it's a buyer's market right now. There are so many incredible people who are looking for jobs and who want to work in media. And there are so many talented voices now more than ever. There are fewer gatekeepers. So you have a lot of really incredible opportunity. And it makes me excited for you.
Awesome. And then we have a question for Tara and Stephen from Frendika. She said, working in fashion and PR and sales myself, I've seen our industry take a turn. Without Fashion Week, without trade shows, how have you chosen to keep the brand name alive and still created exposure for the brand?
You have to really be smart about your decisions and choices. I think from the beginning of the pandemic, it was, we need a plan of action immediately. What was working for us 2 weeks ago was not going to work for us, what we thought, even the next 2-3 months. Blazers were a big thing. Thank God for my business itself, our jeans are the common denominator and everything flowers it. But what was, and the word that I actually have, been using so much is called, we're going into a world of casuality, and so it's completely different. Where we were just this past year, most were in sweats, we were in Zoom and we were doing things, but you have to have a plan of action. And that was really the thought of, okay, how do you handle this situation? Like Hillary and Cindy both, you have to have the team. There's no I in team, and you are who your team is. So, I was so grateful that our team was passionate and really, said it was really about servicing. That was it. Because yes, we knew what we were going through, but we had hundreds of retailers who were going to be experiencing completely different than we were. We were manufacturers, and here they were retailers, and a complete shutdown globally. How are people going to, support, walking into stores and doing that? So we were, you have to think outside the box. This might not be the first or last of this that we're in a pandemic. Things have changed, technology, flying, traveling, 30 years ago, we weren't going to many places as we were today. So, things could happen down the road. And I think in any situation, you have to just have a plan of action. Know who you are, know where you're going, know where you've been to know where you're going. And most importantly, inspire, be passionate and focused, because like anything else, one day you're going to look back over your shoulder and say, I made it through that. Never give up.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep. I mean, for me, on both ends of the business, my retail stores and Monfrere, I think the number one, like the word we used most was pivot. So we really had to pivot and shift everything that we were doing. The common denominator being the denim, but the denim that was our number one best-selling style was no longer our number one best-selling style. So that market had changed, and it was very important to pivot and make sure that we were covering for that person. In retail stores, she wasn't buying what she normally bought at that time of the year. So it was about pivoting to making sure that we had what she needed for that moment. And I feel like, going back to the question, social media had such an important role during this pandemic. Had this happened in 1982, I think things would be a lot different. And I feel like we've been able to weather the storm because we've been able to reach so many more people. Had this happened in, 1982 without .coms and without, Instagram,
Technology.
that technology is what really is made us connect with the rest of the world. So, the sales that are coming from Dubai and Qatar and London and Paris for the retail side would not have happened. And then again, with Montfrere just being in the department stores, pivoting to making sure that we had the product that they needed and using social media as a platform to make everyone aware of the fact that what you are looking for at this moment, we do have. So I think it goes hand in hand in what's really kept our businesses and sustained our businesses.
Yeah, I mean, just to say, 2 years ago, this was a live platform, and today it's live, but on technology. And so again, as Stephen said, pivoting, you just really need to figure out how you're going to maneuver and how you're going to do it wisely. The one thing that I have to say my family taught me is to think smart. That's the only thing you need to think. And then everything will follow through from that point. But it's true. I mean, look, I'm looking at so many boxes on here where usually this is our audience today, and normally we'd be sitting on a panel and, looking out at the audience. So it's just incredible how technology really has emphasized, change in our dynamic and diversified us in so many ways.
I love it. Well, this is where I want to be a renegade and keep going. But since I shouldn't do that, we're actually at time, but I do want to say this. So thank you for all the comments. I have to say, what I keep seeing in the box is like, I love who, what, where. I'm seeing that like since you started speaking, Hillary. I'm seeing that everyone loves your l'agence, which I was so grateful for your French lesson last night, and J Brand and Montfrere. Everyone loves it. And Cindy, everyone is like, your words are so inspiring and spoke to me. So I know these panels are short, and I also know that over the next week, everyone's just going to say how inspired, and you never know when your words really just wake someone up to like, all right, tomorrow I'm doing it. So I'm so grateful for you guys being part of our day, and of course, all the attendees and being part of the day also. So thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you so much. Wow.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
too.
Thanks for having
Bye,
us.
everybody.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
I